The message came just as I was leaving a meeting in Berlin. I had been finishing a very, very big business deal with a company that would make my firm very important across Europe. My phone buzzed and I saw the subject line, "The house is sold." I froze in the fancy marble lobby. My heart sank like a stone in a deep pond. My name is Elena Corvin. I am 35 years old. For 11 years, I have been running a quiet, but very strong business in Zurich. I've helped governments fix big problems, rescued companies that were about to go bankrupt, and helped people recover billions of euros. I had done things most people could only dream of doing. But none of that mattered at that moment. The house my parents sold was supposed to be mine. I had put my heart, my money, and my time into it. I had made a strong offer, and I had planned everything. But my parents had sold it without telling me. My mom's email said they got a really good offer, so they accepted it. Everything was signed. I stood there in the marble lobby, staring at my phone, reading it over and over. I had paid for 5 years of mortgage payments, renovations, insurance, and all sorts of bills. I had worked so hard. But the deed, the official paper saying the house belonged to me, was still in my parents' name. They had said it was just until I was more settled, just until I was ready. But I was already across the world in Berlin, closing the biggest deal of my career. And they had sold my home behind my back. I walked down a quiet hallway and dialed my mother's number. It rang twice before she picked up. "Elena," my mom said, her voice happy and cheerful. "Did you see our email? Isn't it great news?" "Mom," I said, trying very hard to stay calm. "That was my house." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she sighed. "Your father and I needed the money. Barton & Co. isn't doing well, and you're always flying around Europe with your little business." Little business. If only she knew what I had been working on. If only she saw the important papers still in my briefcase. If only she had watched the German minister shake my hand, asking me to help fix their public pension funds. I was doing serious work, work that mattered. "Where will I stay when I go home?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "Oh, you can stay here," she said lightly. "Your old room is just the way you left it. It'll be like when you were 17. As if that was a good thing. Back then, all I got were comparisons to my brother Darius, their golden boy, the child they always praised, now the COO of the very company they said was failing. Back then, I was told to be realistic, to marry well, and to let Darius handle the family business. But I had built everything on my own, with my own hands and mind. And they still took from me. "I have to go," I said, cutting the call short. I returned to the conference room where the deal awaited my signature. I looked at the folder on the table. In just 2 weeks, Barton & Co. would face a full audit by a mysterious new consultancy brought in by the newest board member. Someone they didn't even know. They had sold my house, but soon they would realize who they had sold it to. When they walked into their boardroom next quarter, nervous and adjusting their suits, they would be sitting across the table from their new boss. Sometimes revenge doesn't need shouting or a courtroom drama. Sometimes it's just a smart deal and a quiet seat at the head of the table. While my parents were busy selling my home to try to save their company, I was in Berlin quietly orchestrating the most ambitious business acquisition of my entire career. Barton & Company, the company my parents had built and worked so hard for, wasn't just in trouble. It was in free fall, and I knew exactly why. For the past 18 months, I had been quietly buying their debt bit by bit, using a network of companies and holding firms that were carefully disguised. Every unpaid bill, every late payment from suppliers, all ended up in my hands. They thought I ran a small, boutique advisory firm out of Zurich. In truth, I was Elena Corvin, CEO of Veritas Capital, one of Europe's most powerful companies specializing in taking over struggling businesses. We didn't just rescue companies. We restructured them, changed them, and absorbed them into something better, or something more profitable. My phone buzzed again. A text from Darius. "Mom told you about the house. Sorry, sis, but business is business. Business is business." That's what they had always said to justify everything. When they refused to co-sign my student loan because Darius needed seed money. When they liquidated my childhood savings to cover a shortfall in payroll without ever telling me. And now they had sold the house I had paid for because the company came first. I replied with a simple understood. Then I turned to Alistair Roque, my Berlin legal partner. "Are the contracts finalized?" I asked, speaking in German, a language I had learned years ago while shadowing a company turnaround in Frankfurt. Another life chapter they knew nothing about. He smiled. "Everything is ready, Frau Corvin. By Friday, you'll control 78% of Barton & Company." I signed the final documents with the calm certainty my family always mistook for passivity. It wasn't just a deal. It was a reckoning. In a few weeks, I would legally own controlling interest in Barton and Company, the very company they had sacrificed everything for, including me, including my home. I turned to my assistant. "Book me a flight to London," I said. It's time I paid my parents a visit. The following weeks blurred into executive briefings, internal audits, and asset valuations. I moved into a penthouse overlooking the River Thames, ignoring every call from my mother, every desperate email from Darius. Let them think I was licking my wounds over a house. Let them believe I was still the forgotten daughter off in Europe with her little firm. They had no idea what was about to hit them. The morning everything came together, I stood before the mirror in my suite. My tailored navy blazer was sharp. My hair was pinned with quiet precision. The woman looking back wasn't the disappointment they had dismissed for years. She was the storm they never saw coming. Briefcase in hand, filled with the final documents to cement my control, I headed to Barton and Company's London headquarters. The very building where my father once told me, "You'll never understand real business, Elena." As I walked through the revolving doors, a security guard gave me a polite nod. "Welcome back, Miss Corvin," he said. Funny how things change. I was already on Veritas Capital's payroll. Just like several key executives in the company they still believed was theirs. The elevator ride to the top floor of Barton and Company's London headquarters stretched like an eternity. Floor by floor, I replayed everything in my mind. The years they brushed me aside, the eye rolls when I mentioned business ideas, the lectures, the lies, the betrayal of selling my home. It had all led to this moment. When the doors opened, I stepped into the familiar hallway lined with portraits of the company's founders. I heard my mother's laugh echo from the boardroom, light, forced, anxious. They were already gathered. My parents and Darius, likely discussing the sudden anonymous takeover. I adjusted the cuffs of my blazer and walked forward. It was time for the real Elena Corvin to be properly introduced. Just outside the boardroom, I paused. My father's voice rang out, firm and frustrated. "This has to be a mistake. An unknown firm can't just sweep in and buy Barton and Company. We built this company from the ground up." I could hear Darius, checking his watch nervously. "I've checked it 3 times. Veritas Capital owns 78% of our stock. They've absorbed most of our debt, too. We're legally obligated to meet their CEO today." My mother chimed in, trying to calm things down. "Well, I'm sure it's just paperwork. We've handled worse. We always land on our feet." That's when I opened the boardroom door. Every head turned. My father's face twisted with irritation. "Elena, this meeting is for board members only. Whatever tantrum you're having about the house can wait." I stepped forward, calm and deliberate. "Actually, I'm right on time." I set my leather briefcase on the table with a quiet click. "The CEO of Veritas Capital is scheduled to meet with you at 10 o'clock. Darius frowned, checking his watch again. "Yes, but she's not." "She is." I opened the briefcase and slid out the documentation. "I'm here. I am the CEO of Veritas Capital." Silence. My mother's glass slipped from her fingers, crashing to the floor. My father's face turned chalk white. Darius looked like he had seen a ghost. "That's not possible," he said, shaking his head. "You run a boutique consultancy. You can't be this." "Can't be what exactly?" I asked, tilting my head. "Competent, ambitious, too much of a disappointment to outgrow your entire legacy," he muttered, his voice trembling. I laid the papers out on the table. "You'll find everything in order. Veritas Capital holds majority ownership of Barton and Company, including the controlling board seats. As of this morning, I am your superior." My father reached for the documents, hands trembling. "This is some kind of joke," he said. "No," I said calmly. "This is a lesson in what happens when you underestimate the wrong daughter. It has to be like the joke of selling my house without asking, or borrowing from my education fund without a word, or maybe the joke of calling me a failure while I was building a multinational acquisition firm under your noses." My dad opened his mouth to say something, but my mom spoke first. I watched them both, my heart beating fast. We really needed that money for the company, I thought. "Yes," I said, my voice calm but strong. "To protect your company?" I looked around the big room, with all the tall chairs and shiny tables, and I let out a small laugh. Take a good look around, I thought to myself. "Mom, this isn't your company anymore. It's mine now. My company, Veritas Capital, doesn't just help companies that are having trouble. We also fix them and make them stronger. And Barton and Company? You've been taking money from it for years." "You can't do this," my dad said, his voice shaking. We're your parents. I looked right into his eyes. Business is business, I said quietly. That was the phrase they had always used when they didn't care about me, when they ignored my wishes, my ideas, or my dreams. I turned to the board members sitting around the table. Some of them tried not to smile, but I could see it in their eyes. They had seen my family act bossy and proud for years. Today, they were going to see things change. I told everyone, starting today, we are making big changes. Darius, you are no longer the COO. Dad, you are stepping down as CEO. And Mom, you don't need to be the head of communications anymore. You are firing us? Darius said, his face red and shocked. Your own family? I remembered all the times they ignored me. The birthdays they missed because they wanted me to answer phones instead of celebrating. The vacations they canceled because they wanted my help. They laughed at my very first attempt to invest money, like it was a silly school project. No, I said, smiling just a little. I'm giving you a chance to earn your place. Just like you once gave me a chance. I opened a folder. Darius, there is a job for you in the accounts office, starting from the bottom. Mom gasped. Dad, we need people to sell things door to door for our new project. He looked sick to his stomach. And Mom, the front desk could use someone with a nice smile and a good memory. Her hands flew to her face and she started crying. I put the folder away. You can clean out your desks by 5 p.m. It's your choice. You ungrateful, my dad started. I held up my hand. Careful. You are talking to your boss now. I gathered my papers and started to leave. But before I went through the big wooden door, I stopped. Oh, about my house. The one you sold. Their heads shot up. I smiled. I had bought the company that had bought the house. By tomorrow, the house would be back in my name. The looks on their faces were priceless. Pure surprise, pure shock. After years of them ignoring me, laughing at me, and thinking I couldn't do anything, I had taken back everything they had taken. And even more. I turned to the board. The meeting resumes tomorrow at 9 a.m. Be ready with your reports. Then I looked at my family one more time. For those still working here, you can get your personal things from security. I walked out with my head high. I was no longer the invisible daughter. I was no longer the one they underestimated. As I walked down the hall, my heels clicked against the shiny marble floor. Behind me, I could hear my mom crying softly, my dad shouting angrily, and Darius just standing there frozen. But for the first time in 35 years, their noise didn't bother me. They couldn't hurt me anymore. I had built something they never even imagined I could. I had worked quietly for years, learning, planning, and preparing. They had never taken me seriously, never seen my strength. And now, I was standing at the very top, strong and powerful. I had finally shown them who I really was. Not just their daughter, but someone they had completely underestimated. The next morning, I sat in the big leather chair that used to belong to my dad. Sunlight came through the tall windows and lit up my reflection in the glass behind the desk. My office. I picked up the morning newspaper and laughed softly. The headline read, Baritis Capital buys Barton and Company. CEO identity revealed. If only they knew it was me. If only they understood how long I had been planning this moment. All the years of studying, staying quiet, and making careful moves had led to this. They thought I was just a daughter with a small consultancy in Switzerland. But being underestimated was my secret weapon. It gave me the perfect cover to strike when they weren't looking. I picked up my phone and dialed. Hi, Vespera. I want to put a property on the market. Yes, the townhouse on Runhurst Lane, the one the Corvin family recently sold. Oh, don't worry. I own it now. Listed at market price. No family discount. Sometimes karma comes back in strange ways. Sometimes as a big surprise. Sometimes as a problem or a lawsuit. And sometimes it comes walking into your office in high heels, holding the deed to everything you once thought you owned. If you have ever been ignored, underestimated, or told you couldn't do something, you know this feeling. That feeling of finally showing everyone exactly what they didn't see all along. That feeling of being strong, smart, and unstoppable. That feeling of winning, not just by fighting back, but by being clever, patient, and brave. I stepped into the fresh London air, the wind on my face, and I felt free. The building, the company, the house, they were all mine now. They had tried to keep me small, quiet, and invisible. But I had grown strong. I had worked hard. And now, everyone could see, nothing could stop me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't yelling, punishing, or being mean. Sometimes the best revenge is showing people exactly what they failed to see. And that is exactly what I had done. I had been overlooked for years, underestimated for years, and now, for the first time, I was not only seen, I was unstoppable.